Okay, so are we gonna die in 8 minutes?
Okay, so the sun may have exploded and we wouldn't even know it for at least 8 minutes. Light from the sun takes 8 minutes and 20 seconds to hit Earth, meaning if the sun suddenly blew up, we actually wouldn't know for that period of time. This is because light travels faster than anything else and we wouldn't be able to hear an explosion from space. While this can cause a lot of anxiety, our sun will never explode. It doesn't have enough mass to create a supernova. A star needs to have a mass of 10 times that of our sun in order for it to explode. If the sun were to explode, it would take around 134 days for the shockwave to reach Earth. But the neutrinos and radiation travel at the speed of light and would reach us in 8 minutes and we would all die. So realistically, we can all die in 8 minutes at any given time in our life, because we would have no idea that the sun exploded in that time. This is extremely scary, not only because we would all die, but because it's completely out of anyone's control.
My brother took a selfie with my decapitated head while I was pregnant just because I got married. My name is Kirti Thoris, and I'm a young Indian girl in 2021 when this happens. While I was working with my mother-in-law in the fields, my mother and brother came to visit me. Momentarily abandoning my chores, I went into the kitchen to make some tea. Then my brother suddenly appeared from behind, using a sickle to me. My husband, sleeping upstairs, was awakened by the sound of utensils falling to the floor. Going into the living room, my mother tried to kill him, but he managed to escape. Later, my brother came out of the house, holding my head in his hand, and took a macabre selfie. Then he went to the police station. You might ask what motivated such violence. Shortly before this tragedy, I had entered into a marriage without my parents' consent. My father, named Sanjay, was deeply offended by this marriage, considering my choice of companion too modest. It was he who ordered my death, believing that I had tarnished the family honor.
Never drink Dasani water again, and here's why.
Okay, so Dasani is considered the worst water bottle by millions of people. And many people come to this conclusion before even knowing this about it. And what I'm about to tell you is going to make you never drink Dasani water again. Dasani water has potassium chloride in it, which is the same chemical given to a death row inmate during a lethal injection. And it causes cardiac arrest and death in just minutes. If you don't believe me, just look at the back of any Dasani bottle, and it literally says potassium chloride. Dasani water also has magnesium sulfite and salt in it, which makes no sense because why does water have an ingredient section on the back? It's literally just water. The chemicals in Dasani water also makes the person drinking it more thirsty, so you drink more of it. I don't know what Dasani water is doing, but water is just water and it should be just water. I don't know why they're adding all these different chemicals to it, but something just seems weird. And this is why I'm never drinking Dasani water again.
I became blind and gained over 220 pounds after overdosing on Red Bull. My name is Lena Lupari, and I was 26 years old in 2015 when these events occurred. I am a mother of 3 children, and thought Red Bull was giving me energy, so I used to drink about 28 cans a day. This added over 3,000 calories to my already high-fat and sugar diet, which logically started to make me gain a lot of weight. In addition to weight gain, I was spending more than a quarter of my monthly income to buy enough Red Bull. But I continued to consume it excessively, and very quickly I had severe headaches until one day, in June 2015, I was unable to get out of bed due to migraines, and especially because I was beginning to lose my sight. I was hospitalized, and the doctors noted that my excessive Red Bull consumption led to significant weight gain and a rare condition called idiopathic intracranial hypertension, which caused my brain to swell. This caused severe headaches, migraines, and vision loss. Red Bull has changed my life, and I will never be able to properly take care of my 3 children again.
This is the scary truth about Talking Angela.
Okay, so we all know the mobile phone app Talking Angela, and we've all definitely downloaded it at least once in our lives. Angela is a white cat with blue eyes that has conversations with you and can answer any questions you have. But as of recently, Talking Angela has turned into an app to spy on young children. It is said that the app has been taken over by a creepy man or a creepy group. It also says if you're over 18, you have nothing to worry about. But anything under that, the cat starts asking you extremely weird questions. Like, where do you live, what is your phone number, and what are your parents' names? And the creepy man or group are able to take pictures of you through your own phone. Also, if you zoom in on Angela's eye, you can see a man watching you, which is just absolutely terrifying. There was this one time when this girl decided to lie about her age. She said she was 30 years old, but to her horror, the cat responded with, "That's a lie, you're about 11 or 12 years old," and the cat was correct. Also, a young boy named Eli shortly went missing after downloading the app, and he was never found.
I became paralyzed after smelling a bottle of cabra pepper. My name is Thais Medeiros. From now on, be very careful when you smell a bottle of chili, because it changed my life forever. I was 25 and bursting with joy and vitality. I was at my boyfriend's house and we were planning to have lunch together. As we were cooking, I picked up a bottle of chili, and without thinking too hard, I smelled it. A normal gesture for many people. However, what nobody knew at the time was that I was suffering from respiratory problems. In fact, I'd had an attack the very same day. Within minutes, my body reacted violently to the smell of chili pepper. I started to feel an unbearable itch in my throat, and suddenly lost consciousness. It all happened so fast. My boyfriend and family rushed me to hospital, but my brain had already been without oxygen for more than 8 minutes. The seizure was so violent that it caused cardiac arrest and cerebral edema. I fell into a coma for several days. When I woke up, I had lost all mobility in my body. The doctors think I'll never get my old life back.
These are photos that aren't what they seem, part 1.
Up first is this picture, and at first glance it looks like nothing. But if you look at it again, it literally looks like bodies being dragged into hell. This is absolutely disturbing when you see it, and I kinda wish I could unsee it. Next up is a picture of 4 new planets that we just found. And look at how stunning they are. No, I'm just kidding, these aren't planets at all. They're actually all just the bottom of frying pans. But it's actually insane how much these look like planets. You can show this picture to anybody and I guarantee the first thing that comes to their head is planets. Next up is a picture of a man that is completely invisible. And this picture has been a mystery ever since it went viral. But I hate to break it to you, this man isn't invisible at all. His jeans are just the same color as the water behind him and he's blending in perfectly. Finally, we have all seen alligators in water some point in our lives. And you probably think nothing of it and just assume that they're floating in the water. But what if I told you every time you see an alligator floating in water, they're actually standing underneath the water and this is what they look like. This is kind of funny and I can't believe this is what they do.
I found my daughter, who was presumed dead 6 years ago, at a birthday party. My name is Luz Cuevas, and in 1997, my house was destroyed in a fire. During the fire, I managed to escape with 2 of my daughters, but my third daughter, 10 days old and named Delamar, was nowhere to be found. I rushed back in, checked her crib, but she was not there. The firefighters quickly confirmed that she had died and had been completely consumed by the fire, but I refused to believe it. But in January 2004, one of my daughters was invited to a birthday party, so we went. Strangely, one of the little girls there resembled my 2 daughters, so I quickly thought it could be Delamar. I discreetly took a hair from this girl, whom I thought was mine, and did a DNA test, and I was right, it was her. The investigation then revealed that a certain Carolyn Correa had intentionally caused a fire at my house and had kidnapped my daughter. Since her own baby had been stillborn, she may have suffered a mental breakdown, leading her to believe that Delamar was her child. She raised Delamar under the name Aaliyah for 6 years, leading everyone around her, including her boyfriend, to believe the child was hers. She was then sentenced to 30 years in prison for kidnapping and arson.
These are pictures taken before it all went wrong, part 2.
Up first is this photo. This is the last known image of pregnant woman Shannon Watts. Just a few hours later, she, as well as her 2 daughters who were 3 and 4 years old, would be dead. Murdered by her husband, Chris Watts, all so he could start a new life with the woman he was cheating on her with. This is just chilling, and Netflix actually has a documentary about this case. Up next is this photo. A couple is posing in front of Niagara Falls for a picture. But if you look behind them, the woman in red, whose woman is Ayana Takumasu, a Japanese exchange student. And shortly after this picture is taken, she lost her footing and gets swept away to her death. This is just disturbing because we are literally looking at this girl's final seconds of living. Finally is a picture of a happy couple about to go hiking. But they have no idea what's about to happen to them. Their names are Molly LaRue and Geoff Hood. They were getting their photo taken before hiking the Appalachian Trail, but little did they know this was the last photo they would ever take together. Because shortly after this photo was taken, they were murdered by a wanted man named Paul David Cruz. This is just so sad because look how happy they look.
Some of the names mentioned in the Jeffrey Epstein documents that were just released today are crazy. So let's take a look at a few things we learned today. First of all, there's some seeming confirmation on the fact that Stephen Hawking was enjoying some illicit activities with Jeffrey Epstein. As you can see right here, this is an email from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell. It says, "You can issue a reward to any of Virginia's friends, acquaintances, family that come forward and help prove her allegations are false. The strongest is the Clinton dinner and the new version in the Virgin Islands that Stephen Hawking participated in an underage orgy." Now, I don't know why they would be scrambling to find someone who could deny this if it didn't actually happen, but I don't know, that just sticks out to me. There's also some doubling down on the accusations against Prince Andrew. We knew these were true already. He obviously did this, but in these documents, it just spells out exactly what happened, who was, flown to meet Prince Andrew and where. Then you have some really creepy stuff about Bill Clinton that came out. The documents literally show that they were asked, "Did Jeffrey ever talk to you about Bill Clinton?" And it was answered, "He said one time that Clinton likes them young," referring to girls. Obviously, there were hundreds of pages of information that were released today, so I'm sure more people are going to find more concerning things in them, but I just want to state that obviously I think that all of this has already been washed, so we're never even going to find out a glimmer of the real truth, but I do think at least this is a step in the right direction.
When this Texas girl vanished, her car was found with the tires slashed. Kelly Day Wilson was a 17-year-old girl from Gilmer, Texas. On the 5th of January 1992, she vanished without a trace. She'd been seen at around 8:30 that evening leaving work. She'd headed to the bank to deposit her paycheck but failed to return home that night. Now, an unidentified person was captured on CCTV making the deposit, but the video footage wasn't very clear and it's unknown whether it was actually her that was depositing the check. Worryingly, the next day her car was found at work with the tires slashed. Inside the car were her items such as her handbag, but the keys to the car weren't there. 2 agonizing years after her disappearance, there was still no sign of her. Sergeant James Brown and several other individuals were actually charged for her abduction and presumed murder. Prosecutors would claim that Kelly had been abducted by James and the others. They alleged that the motive was to SA there and accused the men of torturing her and stabbing her to death. They claimed that they'd been part of a satanic cult. However, these claims were largely disproved. It turned out the cult never existed, and 2 months later all charges were dropped. Then a local man named Michael Bibby was convicted of the tire slashing of Kelly's car. Now, he actually admitted to this, but said that he had no part in her disappearance. In 2004, Kelly's employer, who was interestingly the last person to see her, was arrested for indecent child images. Kelly's disappearance remained unsolved and her body has still never been found.
The true story behind this mugshot is absolutely disturbing. This is 54-year-old Stanton Lee Pierce, and in 2017 he was sentenced to 40 years in prison for burning a body. So Stanton had been in and out of prison in the past, but in 2016 he got mixed up in a murder. These were the 3 people that were implicated in this murder scheme. There was 37-year-old Rebecca Bond, pictured over here, who actually shot and killed the 62-year-old victim, Louise Martinez. Then there was 56-year-old Lori Stone Perry and Stanton Pierce, and these 2 were convicted of moving the body. 62-year-old Louise Martinez had been missing for a while, and eventually investigators located his burned prize vehicle out in the middle of nowhere. And when I say out in the middle of nowhere, his burned car was really way out in the middle of nowhere in the woods. Obviously, they knew something had happened to Louise, but they didn't know exactly what had happened. Well, Louise's body was eventually found also burned in a local cemetery, and from that point on, investigators knew that they were looking at a hardcore murder. Eventually, through investigation, investigators were able to determine that Stanton Pierce had helped clean up the crime scene and had helped move the body to that cemetery. He had collected shell casings after the victim was shot and killed, he had removed bullets from a wall that had gotten lodged in there, and he had even cleaned up blood from the surrounding area. And to finish the story out, Stanton Pierce was sentenced to 40 years in prison. He's going to be over 90 years old when he's finally released. The true story behind this smiling mugshot is incredibly disturbing. Pictured is 28-year-old Caitlin Taylor from Tennessee, and in 2020 she pled guilty to murdering both of her grandparents. In March of 2020, a welfare check was performed on the home of Celeste and Eugene McDaniel. The two hadn't responded to messages from family and friends for a while, so officers were sent to their home to investigate, and what they discovered inside was disturbing. Inside of the home, the police found the bodies of both grandparents. They had been shot and stabbed, and the crime scene was extremely bloody. Not present at the home, though, was the couple's 28-year-old granddaughter, Caitlin Taylor, who supposedly lived with them. When authorities finally located Caitlin later in the day, she had brown staining on her shoes, she had sustained an injury on her hand, and she quickly told officers that her grandmother had came at her with a knife. Caitlin, though, had struggled with erratic behavior for years. In fact, this Facebook post from a local woman who lived in Caitlin's area claims that Caitlin broke into her home, and this woman came inside and found Caitlin sleeping in her bed. Eventually, though, at age 29, Caitlin Taylor pled guilty to the murders of both of her grandparents, and she was then sentenced to 2 life sentences in prison. Now, in an eerie twist, when I was looking up photos for this case, I found Caitlin's ad on a prison dating website. You can read all this for yourself, but I think it's eerie how she wrote, "You take care of me and I'll take care of you, wink." I couldn't find anything talking about exactly why Caitlin murdered her grandparents, but I do have to say that this mugshot of her smiling almost proudly after being arrested for the murder of her own family members is profoundly disturbing.
This is by far one of the worst ways somebody has ever died, and this is a massive trigger warning. If you are claustrophobic or triggered by MRI machines, I don't recommend watching this video. This is an MRI machine, and MRI stands for magnetic resonance imaging. These machines use extremely strong magnetic fields. These are pictures of incidents involving MRI machines that didn't result in anybody's death. This is just to give you an example of how strong the magnets are. These machines will literally take anything magnetic. This brings us to the story of 32-year-old Rajesh Maru. In January of 2018, he was in the hospital with a relative who was scheduled to get an MRI scan. The family member that he was with needed an oxygen tank, so he was holding it for them. Now, if you ever got an MRI scan, you know that the staff is very informative about nothing metallic ever being in the room, not even your keys. So Rajesh was standing outside of the room where the MRI scan was being done. Now, there was obviously an attendant there that had no idea how these machines worked. While Rajesh was holding the oxygen tank, he was told by the attendant, it was okay to go into the room even though the MRI machine was on. And when Rajesh got within 4 feet of the MRI machine, within seconds he was sucked into the MRI machine. This is an illustration of what happened. Now, you may ask, why didn't he just drop the oxygen tank? Well, he had no time. Literally, the moment the magnetic field caught it, he just got pulled. Now, he did not die from any impact. It was much, much worse. Since he was instantly sucked into the MRI machine with the oxygen tank in his hand got stuck between the wall of the MRI machine and the oxygen tank, which caused the oxygen tank to leak, which then became a liquid, which in liquid form is extremely poisonous. Rajesh was then inhaling all of these fumes into his lungs. They said within 15 seconds his entire body bloated up and turned solid black. He would actually die from pneumothorax, which is when excess air enters your lungs, causing them to collapse. 3 hospital staff members were arrested and they were charged with death by negligence. This death is absolutely awful, and I now have a fear of MRI machines.
Day after arriving on holiday for a birthday trip for a friend, this woman was found dead. Even after a shocking video went viral, still no arrests have been made. Shankila Robinson was a 25-year-old woman from Charlotte in North Carolina. She was a successful businesswoman and an owner of a clothing company. In October 2022, she got to San Jose del Cabo in Mexico. She was due to stay there with some friends for one of their birthdays. Now, her mum spoke with her on the morning of the 28th of October. She reported that she seemed happy and in good spirits. Tragically, it was the last time she would ever speak to her. A day later, she was found dead in the villa. Her friends reported that she died of alcohol poisoning, but it didn't add up. Her friends all very quickly flew home after her death, but the death certificate showed something entirely different. It showed she'd actually died from a spinal cord and neck injury. There was no mention of alcohol poisoning. A police report also showed that the victim was seen at the villa on the 29th of October by medics. She was dehydrated and unable to communicate. Her so-called friends had decided they didn't want her to be taken to hospital for any treatment. They insisted that she would be treated at the villa, and then she began to have a fit. Paramedics tried to intervene, but she was pronounced dead at 5:57 p.m. Then a shocking video went viral showing her being attacked in a room. She was being physically beaten by the people that she called her friends. She was kicked, punched, and thrown to the ground. Now, it's unknown when the video was taken. It was declared that the young woman's death resulted from direct aggression. However, Shankila's fellow travellers all continued their lives as normal, and as yet no arrests have been made. Is this suspicious death a self-unaliving or a brutal murder? It was the 11th of January in 2015 in Rockford, Illinois. Kayla Seago was in a relationship with a man called Billy, who was the father to her 3 children. Upsettingly, Billy was abusive to Kayla throughout their relationship, and he made this quite clear to everybody. On one occasion, one of Kayla's acquaintances had gone to collect her from her house, and she was met by Billy chasing them both with a knife. On the fateful day in question, Kayla had gone to a friend's house that night, where Billy already was. Now, it was only apparently down the road from their house, and the pair were chatting with others, and Billy was drinking and playing cards. At around 1 a.m, an argument broke out between the pair. Billy attacked Kayla and burst her lip. Obviously physically hurt and upset, she went back to her house. Now, Billy's account of what happened next goes something like this. He said that she was texting him telling him she was going to unalive herself, and she then sent him a picture of her preparing to do so. He claimed that he went back to the house and entered via a door that was open. He stated that he found her deceased in the basement and cut her down. He called an ambulance at 4:15 a.m. and said one of his friends was trying to resuscitate her. It was tragically too late to save her. Medics arrived on the scene and Kayla was pronounced dead. Kayla hadn't left any type of S note, and her family were incredibly suspicious. Had someone set this up to look like a self-unaliving when it was actually a murder? Interestingly, Billy wasn't able to provide officers with the text that he claimed that Kayla had sent him. When he provided the photo to police of the image that he claimed that Kayla had sent him, she interestingly didn't have the burst lip. Now, we know she did have a burst lip when she left the friend's house that evening. Her phone was also found upstairs, not down in the basement where she was discovered deceased. Had she really taken a photo, gone upstairs to put her phone back up there, then gone back downstairs to end her life? Something just wasn't adding up. Also, the autopsy report stated that the injuries found on Kayla were unusual for a self-unaliving. Kayla's family still have no answers in this case, and if it was a murder, nobody has been arrested.
There's a horrific murder case that's happening right now out of Arizona that's still unsolved. Let's talk about what happened to Mercedes Vega. On April 16th of this year, Mercedes was abducted from the parking garage of her Tempe, Arizona apartment and brutally killed. That night, security footage shows her walking into her apartment's parking garage a little after 9 p.m. She was on her way to meet her friends and have a fun night at Dave & Buster's, but in this footage, she had no idea what was about to happen to her. Sometime before making it to her car, she was attacked and taken by at least 2 people, and the details that follow are still a mystery. A little after 1 a.m. the next morning, the Department of Public Safety was called in to investigate a car that was on fire along the side of Interstate 10 in Tonopah. Upon arriving to the scene, they found Mercedes' burned body in the back seat, and she was deceased. In the last few hours of her life, she was tortured, and according to the medical examiner, she had been shot in the arm, had blunt force trauma to her head, and had traces of bleach in her throat. But all of this did not kill her. She ultimately died from smoke inhalation while being burned alive in that car. Investigators also found gloves and bleach in the front seat and lighter fluid in the back, but there are still a ton of questions that remain in this case, and nothing about this makes any sense. The car that Mercedes was found in was not her car. Her car, which was a 2019 Dodge Charger, was found abandoned near Mill Avenue in Tempe. She was not burned in her own vehicle, and so far, investigators still don't know who the car she was found in belongs to. One of the big questions in this case is, how did her car get from her apartment to where it was found? And who drove the other car to Tonopah? Mercedes' parents believe that this was a targeted attack and that death wasn't the ultimate goal, but that Mercedes fought back, which resulted in her death. Her parents mentioned that she danced at a club 2 nights a week, and many question if her death could possibly be connected back to someone she met while at work. It's now been 7 months, and Mercedes' murder is still unsolved. Whoever committed this vicious attack is still out there. Right now, there is a silent witness award of up to $2,000 for information leading to an arrest. But if you'd like to donate to up that reward or to report a tip, please contact the number on the screen. For more information on this case and to show your support, please follow this account that was created for Mercedes that's run by her family. She and her family deserve justice.
Do not watch this video if you are home alone. This is the unsettling, unsolved murder case of Kathy and Samantha Netherland. Kathy Netherland was a 48-year-old mother to 16-year-old Samantha. They lived in a neighborhood in Bardstown, Kentucky. Kathy worked as a special education teacher at the elementary school in the area. Samantha was a talented young singer excited to attend her junior prom later that year. It was 2014, and sadly the year prior, Kathy's husband Bob had sadly passed away from cancer. On the 22nd of April, Kathy failed to turn up at work, which was very unusual. Her dad, Norris, decided to go to the house and check that everything was okay. When he arrived, he had a horrendous shock. After getting no response from the front door, he peeped through the front window, and what he saw would scar him for life. Kathy was lying dead in the front room. He ran to the back of the house, where he also saw Samantha on the floor deceased. He quickly alerted emergency services, who raced to the scene. The mother and daughter had been murdered, their throats had been cut, and Kathy had gunshot wounds. Samantha had tragically been stabbed. Investigators immediately started looking into who would have committed such a hideous crime and why. Now, often in these cases, the spouse is looked into, but as I said, Kathy's husband had actually already passed away. The only other family member in the household left was the other daughter, Holly. Now, Kathy's sister speculated that she was the only person who could possibly have gained anything from these deaths. She stood to inherit money if the pair died. Not only this, but 2 days prior to the murders, Holly tweeted, "Your words went way too far this time. You'll be lucky if I decide to come home." This was believed to be in relation to her mother. However, many teens argue with their parents and don't end up murdering them. Holly was never named as a suspect. Then there were theories of the deaths being gang-related. An anonymous prison inmate claimed the killings were part of a gang initiation. This was also never confirmed by police to be a possibility though. Some of the most significant evidence is a car spotted on CCTV at the time of the murders. A black Chevy Impala was seen travelling north on US 150 from Botland to Bardstown. It was also seen near the house that evening. Police state that the person or persons in the car either knows who did it or were the ones or one who did it. The car has never been located and the murders remain chillingly unsolved. This girl was abducted on the way to work and brutally murdered. Holly Bobo was a 20-year-old student nurse from Darden, Tennessee. It was April 2011 and she was busy preparing for an exam. On the morning of the 13th, she spoke to her boyfriend briefly on the phone and then left her house just after 7:30 to get in her car to go to class. Shockingly, she never even made it to her car before she got grabbed by a man in camouflage. She then disappeared into the woods, never to be seen alive again. Now, her brother Clint had actually witnessed the abduction and he spotted it out of his bedroom window. He'd only just woken up by dogs barking outside. When he looked, he presumed it was just Holly and her boyfriend Drew. However, neighbours had heard screams and called Holly's mum Karen to report the commotion. Karen was at work at the time and rang police. When police arrived, they noticed a spot of blood on the floor where Holly had last been seen. Clint gave a detailed description of the man to police and a huge search began. Over the next couple of days, local volunteers and police scoured the area for any signs of the missing girl. On the 15th of that month, some of Holly's belongings were found, including her phone with the SIM card removed. Tragically, in 2014, some of Holly's remains were found by locals in a wooded area near Darden. Her skull had a bullet hole. So let's take a look at some of the suspects in this case. A local S offender was highly suspected by the community. He was named Terry Britt. Although he matched the description of the offender, he was never charged in relation to the case. Just prior to the discovery of Holly's remains, a local man named Dylan Adams was arrested of unrelated weapons charges. He actually ended up telling police that he saw Holly and his brother Zach at Zach's house. He also apparently implicated friend Jason Autry too. He said Jason was there at the time and his brother Zach had a camouflage outfit. Zach, Jason and Dylan, who is mentally disabled, were charged with aggravated kidnapping, first-degree murder and R. Dylan also told police that Zach admitted to R-ing Holly and taping it, although no video evidence has ever been found. He ended up retracting his entire statement and saying that police had coerced him into it. Then, Jeffrey and Mark Percy were arrested on charges of accessory after the fact and tampering with evidence, but the charges were dropped. The original charges came about after a former roommate of Jeffrey's called Sandra made a shocking claim to police. She told them that Jeffrey had showed her parts of a video of Zach S.A.ing Holly. The video was never found despite police searching 20 phones. Another man named Shane Austin was also arrested in this case. Police said that they had reason to believe that Shane had helped dispose of Holly's body. However, Shane was then found deceased in February 2015 in a hotel room after self-unaliving. In 2017, Zach went on trial. There was no DNA evidence, but Jason agreed to testify against him. He claimed that he'd gone to Shane's house and saw the Adams brothers disposing of evidence. He said that he saw Zach with Holly's body wrapped in a blanket. He admitted to helping dispose of remains. A neighbour of Holly's had actually seen a white truck speeding away from the scene that day, and Zach had a truck exactly like that. Zach's ex-girlfriend also stated in court, he said he would tie me up just like he did Holly Bobo and no one would ever see me again. Zach was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. As for Dylan Adams, Zach's brother, he entered an Alford plea to facilitation of murder and kidnapping. Now this means that he is pleading guilty, but he is kind of stating that he's innocent. He was given 15 years plus 35 years. Jason pleaded guilty to solicitation to commit murder and kidnapping, and he got 8 years in prison. Many people, though, believe that the wrong people are behind bars. Zach's attorney stated that the initial suspect, Terry Britt, was the real killer. He apparently fit the description and had a history of stalking and R-ing blonde women. His alibi also didn't check out.
Imagine getting married only to be decapitated by your husband 3 months later. 21-year-old couple Jared and Angie got married in October 2022. Around 4 p.m. on the 11th of January, police were called to their home in Texas. Police made a grim discovery in the pair's bathroom after finding, quote, what appeared to be the head of the victim to be in the shower, end quote. Angie's body was discovered on the floor near the bed in a pool of blood with multiple stab wounds to her back. It was actually Jared's poor parents that initially made this discovery after entering the home. They then obviously alerted police to what they found. Jared was arrested and has confessed to killing his wife with a kitchen knife. Jared was actually captured on CCTV, casually stealing a bottle of beer from Angie's workplace just minutes after it's believed that he killed her. Angie's friends have reported to police that the couple's relationship was toxic and Jared was very controlling. Jared's bond is currently set at $500,000. This schoolboy stabbed his teacher to death in front of a classroom full of students. 61-year-old Anne Maguire was a Spanish teacher teaching in Leeds. She'd actually worked at the school for 40 years and she was only 5 months off retirement. However, in April 2014, something absolutely horrific happened. One of her students was 15-year-old Will Cornick. He'd always been described as a smart student who never really caused any trouble. Classmates regarded him as a polite student, but after he got diagnosed with diabetes, his personality seemed to change. In 2013, he tried to join the army, but because of his diagnosis, he was rejected. Being in the army had been his dream, so this was really upsetting for him. After failing to complete his Spanish homework, he was given detention by Anne. He also expressed a wish to her that he wanted to drop Spanish, but she wouldn't let him, which only angered him more. He began to develop a deep-rooted grudge against Anne. Shockingly, he reportedly messaged his friends on Facebook asking if one of them would kill her for him for £10. During one school day, halfway through his Spanish class, Will decided to get up and attack Anne with a knife. The classmates watched on in horror as he chased her out of the classroom. When there, another teacher heard her screams and tried to shield Anne from any more blows from him. Will then allegedly returned to his class and told his classmates how it was a shame that he hadn't killed her. However, Anne did actually pass away from her injuries. Will later admitted that he did plan also to kill 2 other teachers. One of them was actually pregnant at the time. He's been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 20 years.
There's a strange missing persons case happening right now out of Oregon, and we should talk about it. This is Gwen Brunel. She went missing during a solo road trip from Boise, Idaho to California. She told family and friends that she was meeting up with a nationally recognized rabbit judge in a small town near Fresno, but she never made it. The timeline of events after she left her home is bizarre, and it's what makes this case so strange. Gwen left her home in Boise on June 26th of this year. The trip seemed really sudden to her family and friends, but she told them that she was planning on meeting up with a rabbit judge in California to show some of her show rabbits. From a very young age, she was an expert on raising and showing purebred rabbits, so much so that she had won awards and was nationally recognized. It was her calling, and she loved her rabbits. So that day, she packed up her 2008 Honda Element with some personal belongings, some clothes for a road trip, and 3 cages filled with 11 of her show rabbits. Also packed up was about a week's worth of food and water for the rabbits. She promised her dad that she would keep in touch, but no one heard from her again after she stepped foot outside of her house, and her cell phone was soon shut off. Gwen was then spotted at a convenience store about 20 miles from her home. But what's strange is that she was caught on CCTV footage wearing different clothes from when she left her house. She left her home in a blue shirt and Nike shoes, but at the store she was wearing a red shirt and knee-high dress boots. What's also weird is that the store was only 20 miles away, yet it took her 3 hours to get there, and no one knows what she was doing in the meantime. Gwen was officially last seen in Jordan Valley, Oregon 1 day later. She had stopped at a Sinclair gas station around noon, got gas, and then went across the street to buy snacks at Mrs. Z's convenience store. There she told the attendant that she was in a hurry, but she then spent the next hour in the parking lot in her car without moving. This concerned the worker, so they went out to make sure that she was okay, but Gwen stated that she was fine. But after this, she disappeared, and it didn't take long for her parents to report her missing. 4 days later, Gwen's car was found abandoned near Sucker Creek Road in Malheur County, just a half-mile from the highway. It was reportedly parked at a pullout that was commonly used by visitors. All 4 windows were partially open, and the keys and the rest of her personal belongings, including her credit cards and driver's license, were still inside. Also inside of the car were all 11 of her rabbits, but sadly at this point, because of the heat, 5 of them had perished. Authorities and dozens of volunteers began searching for Gwen in the area near where her car was found, and even a private search of Sucker Creek was conducted, but nothing would be found for 2 months. On September 10th, Gwen's t-shirt was found tangled up in a barbed wire fence near Dog Creek. Shortly after, Gwen's boots were found roughly 80 yards from where the shirt was found. This was all found less than 2 miles from where her abandoned car was found months earlier. More than 300 miles have been searched using ATVs, dogs, and even by air, but no other trace of Gwen has ever been found. Police say that there is no sign of an abduction and believe that she may have wandered off into the rangeland. But like I mentioned earlier, Gwen absolutely loved her rabbits. It would be incredibly odd for her to leave them in a hot car to perish without willingly coming back. According to her family, Gwen did take medications for certain mental conditions that could make her moody or inattentive. Her mom reached out to the rabbit judge that Gwen was supposed to meet, and according to them, they never heard from Gwen and had no idea that she was even planning to come. They said that they weren't expecting Gwen at all. This has left her family wondering if she was planning on meeting up with someone else and just didn't tell them. Her mom believes that Gwen is still somewhere out there on the rangeland and wonders if she was possibly going through a mental crisis. Regardless, they just want to bring their daughter home. It's now been 5 months with no sign of Gwen, and just like with the Chelsea Grimm case, it's really concerning that her car was found abandoned and that she was a woman traveling alone. Gwen is described as being 5'7", roughly 140 pounds, and has brown hair and brown eyes. If you have any information at all, please either contact the Boise Police at 208-377-6790 or the Malheur County Sheriff's Office at 541-473-5125.
This is the disturbing case of the child who killed a child. In July 2018, 6-year-old Alicia McPhail was abducted from her bed. She'd been staying with her grandparents in the Isle of Bute. She'd gone to sleep watching Peppa Pig, and no one had any idea of the horrors that would unfold that evening. Meanwhile, 16-year-old Aaron Campbell was drinking with friends at his house. Aaron apparently became upset in the night because he had been arguing with his mum. He had had a challenging upbringing involving physical and emotional abuse. Aaron decided that evening he wanted to get some substances to smoke from a couple that he knew. The couple in question were Alicia's dad, Robert, and his girlfriend. They'd been known to sell substances to Aaron previously, but he could not get hold of them. Intending to go and steal them off them, Aaron armed himself with a knife. He headed to Robert's house where he lived with his parents and girlfriend. This was obviously where Alicia was staying that evening. When he arrived at the house, he noticed the 6-year-old sleeping in her bed and took the opportunity to snatch the poor defenseless young child. Disgustingly, he carried her to a secluded location, SA'd her, and then killed her. He then disposed of his clothes in the sea. At 6 a.m. the next day, Alicia's grandparents woke up to discover that the little girl was missing. They straight away alerted police and locals. When the family asked Aaron to keep an eye out for the little girl, he texted them back saying, "Oh damn, I'm sure she's not went too far." A local man soon discovered Alicia's lifeless body around 15 minutes away from her house. Along with a lot of the local community, Aaron's mum actually checked her CCTV of her house. She was hoping that this would help with the investigation, and it definitely did. She saw her son leaving and returning from the house that night, and she handed the evidence over to police. Aaron was arrested, and it was discovered that the clothes that he'd abandoned on the beach did actually match with his DNA.
This guy is one of the most awful serial killers there has ever been, and I feel like he's never talked about. In my opinion, this guy's worse than Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer. Hi Meg, I talk about true crime. Let's get into the story of the Butcher, the worst serial killer Canada has ever seen. Robert Pickton was born October 24th, 1949, in British Columbia, Canada. Robert had quite a bad upbringing. His dad was very abusive. He actually grew up on a pig farm. From a really young age, him and his brother had to work countless hours on this pig farm, and then they were forced to go straight to school without taking a shower or anything. Because he was showing up to school unwashed, Robert started getting bullied, and they gave him the nickname Stinky Piggy. As Robert grew older, he was said to be very quiet, but he apparently sometimes had these weird bursts of bizarre behavior. These bursts would come out of nowhere and he would just start acting really strange. In 1996, Robert's brother opened up a kind of charity thing. The charity was started to try to make more money for their pig farm. It was called the Piggy Palace Good Times Society. And what they would do is they would hold huge parties and raves to try and raise money. And I'm not joking when I say huge parties and raves. 17,000 people were said to have shown up at one point. 17,000 people at once. Sex workers and biker gangs would join these parties as well, but for Robert, it all started going downhill in 1997, when he attempted to murder a girl. I don't usually do this in these videos, but a lot of you ask what blush I use, and this is the blush I use. It's usually £10 on the TikTok shop, but it's on for $5 right now. So if you click right here, you can get it. I just ordered kind of a peachy version of this. I'm not being paid to talk about this. I just saw they were on offer and you guys ask about these all the time. So get your hands on them for cheap while you can. So Robert attempts to murder a woman for the first time that we know of. According to her statement, he attempted to handcuff her and then he started stabbing her multiple times before she managed to get away. This should have been the thing that got him on police radar, but he was able to get the charges dropped, because the woman he attacked was on a lot of drugs at the time, and Robert used that to come up with a story. He told police, like, she was hitchhiking, I was just trying to help her, and she attacked me. And they believed him because she was on drugs. And unfortunately, for the next 60 women he would kill, he was let go. And he was able to come up with a strategy that wouldn't get him caught next time. He developed a plan and started killing a bunch of women. And Robert was really, really good at staying under the radar. Now, what did he do exactly? Let me tell you, because it's disturbing. First of all, he always went for hitchhikers, addicts, or prostitutes. And what he would do is he would promise them money, drugs, accommodation, anything to get them back to his farm. Once he got them back, he would then shoot or strangle them to death. And this next part is why he was given the name the Butcher. He would take the victims' bodies, chop them up, and feed them to his pigs. Now, if you're not aware of this already, pigs will literally eat anything, everything. So the evidence was just, bye. They were getting rid of the evidence for him. All of a sudden, there is an increase in missing women in the area. But sadly, because he only went after sex workers or addicts or hitchhikers, no one cared. And this always makes me so mad with cases like these. Like, they're still human beings, but no bodies were showing up, so there was no crime, no body, no crime. But as the numbers started rising, people were kind of getting a bit worried. A group of people that weren't the police actually got a list together of all of the names of these young women who were missing. They brought that to the police and were like, do you see now? And that's when the investigation actually began into finding out what happened to these girls. And all of these girls had one person in common: Robert Pickton. He was the only person whose name continuously came up when they were looking for these girls. Police needed a way to get onto the farm with a warrant without him knowing about it and hiding all the evidence first. And so they heard that he had possession of an illegal firearm. And so they used that as the cover-up to get onto his property. On the property, they found multiple items that belonged to these missing women, along with some blood-stained clothing and tiny bone fragments. Now, things aren't looking too good for Robert, but because the pigs had eaten all the evidence, basically all of it, they were only able to charge him with the murder of 6 women. And so he got 6 counts of murder. When he got arrested, he actually said that he killed 49 women and that he was sad that he didn't get to round up to 50. What the hell, Robert? What does he want the police officer to say, like, "Oh, I feel so bad for you"? No! He was arrested in 2002, and this trial was huge. Of course, he was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. But guys, that's not the worst part of this story, because I'm getting to that now. One element of the story that I kept out until now is that Robert sold the meat of his pigs to people who lived around the area. These pigs, who ate the remains of 60 women, were sold to his neighbors. When I say neighbors, I just mean people who live in the area. So like secondhand cannibalism. I could never eat pig again if that was me. So yeah, they were pretty disturbed and freaked out by this information, which is totally understandable and just totally disgusting. After a huge search of his property, police now believe that the number of women Robert killed was in the 60s. 60 women. 60 mother, daughters, wives. It's insane. It really annoys me with cases like these. I know it was like in 2002 and things have changed, but have they? I find that a lot of cases like these that I cover always start with, oh, all these women were going missing, but they were sex workers, but they were drug addicts, who cares? And it's like, it's insane to me that like they're not seen as equals to any other woman walking on the street, but whatever. Hopefully that changes. And for those wondering, I have actually covered this story before, but the quality of the video was so bad that I couldn't keep it up anymore. Like, it really bothered me to watch back, so I thought I would remake it in a higher quality way. I hope you guys enjoyed it regardless, and have a wonderful day. My heart goes out to every single one of the victims, their families, and people who cared about them, and I hope Robert rots in jail. Anyways, this is not a good representation of Canadians. We're actually really nice people. I'll see you all in the next video. Love you guys. Bye.
This case made me terrified to go to the cinema. This is the case of the horror in Screen 9. James Holmes was raised in California. His mum was a nurse and his dad was a scientist. From a young age, he was experiencing night terrors and allegedly actually tried to take his own life when he was just 11 years old. He was apparently obsessed with guns and weapons and had dreamed of becoming a mass murderer. Between May and July 2012, he legally bought 4 guns. Background checks were conducted and he was allowed the weapons. He also bought spike strips, which, if you don't know, pop the tyres of cars if they chase after you. On July the 19th, just hours before tragedy would unfold, James mailed his notebook to his psychiatrist. Inside the notebook, James detailed his plans to kill. The notebook was actually discovered later on undelivered. Just prior to entering a cinema in Aurora, James rang a crisis line to tell them about his plans to kill. However, the call was disconnected after just 9 seconds. At the midnight showing of The Dark Knight Rises, CCTV captures James walking into the cinema. He walks into Screen 9, props open the door, and then walks back out again. Shockingly, he goes to his car and gets guns out and gas canisters. He re-entered the screen at about 12:38 PM and set off 2 gas canisters. When he entered Screen 9 again, he immediately opens fire on the audience, instantly killing 10 people. 2 others later died in hospital from their injuries. An additional 70 people were injured. This was an absolutely packed out cinema. James also shot at people as they scrambled to exit the screen. His youngest victim was a 6-year-old girl. Witnesses said this all unfolded as there was actually a gunfight on the screen, and initially they all thought it was special effects and just part of the film. Police were actually on the scene very quickly after the first 911 call. James surrendered to the police and was arrested in the car park. He was apparently very calm when he was arrested and told police that he had booby-trapped his apartment. When police investigated his apartment, this was found out to be true. He was sentenced to 12 consecutive life sentences. Do not watch this video unless you have a very strong stomach. This case and what this man did to his mum is truly sickening. On the 31st of August 2019, Margaret Sumney was unreachable. Her family just knew something was wrong. They tried and failed to get hold of her for 2 days before eventually ringing the police. The police conducted a welfare check on her in her house in Pennsylvania. What they discovered was horrifying. They found glass all over the floor and blood smeared on the walls of the home. They found the 67-year-old's body in the bathtub of the house. She'd been beaten to death. The autopsy revealed that she died from blunt force trauma to her head. Police interviewed her son David, who initially denied having anything to do with her murder. However, police searched his phone and found some horrific photographs. They uncovered 277 sickening images. These included David's selfies with his mum's dead body. In some, his face was smeared with her blood and he was doing a thumbs up pose. Police also discovered that David was in possession of some of his mum's jewellery and blank cheques. Now, he previously did have a record of assaulting his mother twice, as well as his now deceased father. The same year as his mum's murder, it was alleged that he waterboarded and strangled his ex-girlfriend in an Atlantic City hotel. He apparently slipped through the cracks in the police databases, allowing him to continue to offend. He was soon arrested and it was found that when he committed his mum's murder, he was taking a large amount of Adderall. His defence argued that due to the substances and alcohol in his system, he had diminished responsibility. Originally, he faced charges of first-degree murder and abuse of a corpse. However, he entered a guilty plea, so would only be charged with third-degree murder. He was sentenced to 20 to 40 years in prison. Terrifyingly, as he's now been in prison since 2019 and due to his good behaviour behind bars, he may be released in just 17 years.
This mysterious case absolutely does not sit right with me. Someone knows something and has not come forward. On the 12th of July 2015, 18-year-old Tiffany and her parents attended a graduation party in New Jersey. At around 9 p.m, one of Tiffany's friends spoke to her parents and claimed that they were really annoyed because Tiffany had used their debit card without permission. Tiffany initially denied this to her friend, but then did admit this to her mum Diane a little bit later. At this point, they were all outside Tiffany's house and Diane went inside to find her husband. When she returned outside of the house, Tiffany had vanished. Now, they were able to see Tiffany on the deer cameras that they had outside the house. She appears to be walking down the driveway in her normal clothing and white headband. When they tried to find Tiffany, they actually made a terrifying discovery. Her phone was lying on the floor at the bottom of the driveway. Immediately, they knew something was wrong as Tiffany never had her phone out of her sight. At 11:30 p.m, her family called the police. Little did they know, 27 minutes earlier, Tiffany had been hit by a train. Frustratingly, pretty much straight away, police presumed this death to be a self-unaliving. However, that just didn't seem to fit with the evidence presented. All of Tiffany's family and friends said how much of an upbeat person she was and that she was really happy at the time. She was making plans for the future, and the autopsy also showed that she had a clean toxicology report. Now, in the deer cam footage, she was fully clothed, but when she was found, she was just in her underwear with no shoes on. Upsettingly, 2 weeks after her death, Tiffany's mum actually found her missing trainers and headband more than a mile away from the tracks. Could someone have murdered Tiffany and then dumped her body on the train tracks to make it look like she did this herself? Tiffany's parents certainly think so. They definitely suspect some foul play was involved.
I'm going to warn everybody right now, the case that we're about to cover is easily one of the most disturbing true crime stories I've ever heard in my life, so viewer discretion is really advised for this one. This is Kevin Davis. He was 18 years old back in 2014 when this horrific event took place. Kevin lived here in Corpus Christi, Texas, and shared an apartment with his mother, Kimberly, and his sister, Destiny. On May 26, 2014, Kevin snapped. He had been having homicidal thoughts for a long time, but on that particular day, he decided to bring his dreams and his fantasies into reality. On that morning, Kevin told his mother, Kimberly, that he wanted to unalive himself, and she told him that she couldn't stop him if he wanted to. After hearing this unexpected response from his mother, Kevin went into a rage. He grabbed a cord and attempted to strangle his mother on the couch where she was sitting. But his mom, Kimberly, managed to fight him off, and in a panic, Kevin went into the other room and grabbed a hammer. Now, this is where it gets really disturbing, so if you're still here with me and you have a weak stomach, don't keep listening. Kevin then bashed his own mother's skull in with the hammer, hitting her at least 20 times. And he then grabbed a knife from the kitchen and inserted the knife into the head wound. At that point, Kimberly's head was opened up, she had a massive head wound, and her brain was exposed. And Kevin stuck his hand into his own mother's head and played with her brains. He later told detectives that it felt like putty. Now, after his mother was dead, Kevin dragged her corpse into another room and her, which is unbelievably shocking and disgusting. After all this was said and done, he went to a neighbor's house, told them to call 911, told them that he had just murdered someone, and he was arrested without incident. When Kevin ultimately arrived at the police station, he was brutally honest with investigators about his crimes. I listened to the entire interrogation, and I cannot unhear some of the things that he told investigators. It's vile and shocking. But at one point, he smiles at the investigators with a little grin and says, "Yes, I guess I lost my to a corpse." After his trial, he was handed down a sentence of life in prison. He's still alive. He's still in Texas right now. And he even admitted to investigators that if he was given the chance, if he were out on the street again, he would kill again. I'm sorry to have to fill your guys' minds with this stuff, but this is a truly disturbing case that I can't stop thinking about because of how horrific it is. And yeah, I cannot believe that this happened. This is Peter Scully, one of the worst pedophiles in world history. I'm about to tell you his story, but seriously guys, this one is incredibly disturbing. It's so dark, and viewer discretion is really advised for this video. So Peter Scully, he's still alive. He was from Australia, he had a family there, but he was engaging in criminal activities, and he eventually fled the country and moved to the Philippines. And this is where the darkness really began. While he was in Australia, Peter Scully started up an international child sex abuse ring. The things that were done to these kids are, I can't even talk about them here on TikTok, but he also started up a pay-per-view video service. And with these videos, he was producing CP, but one of the most extreme forms of CP that can possibly be produced. So how did all this happen? Well, when he was out living in the Philippines, Peter Scully had 2 Filipina girlfriends. They would go out to the streets, they would find kids that needed money or looked impoverished, they would bring them back to the house they shared with Peter, and the things that went on afterwards are literally unspeakable. Remember, like I mentioned before, Peter was the head of an international ring of people that enjoyed the abuse of kids, and he provided videos for these clients. But his most infamous video was titled Daisy's Destruction. This video that he produced was so extreme, so hardcore that people on the internet, when they heard about what happened in the video, literally thought that it was an urban legend, and they thought that there was no way this could be real. This is an actual screenshot of the beginning of the video. This is a screenshot from the very beginning of the video. In the video, 3 young girls are repeatedly tortured for hours and hours on end by Peter Scully and his 2 girlfriends from the Philippines. They are beaten, they are sexually abused. I can't even describe, like I said on TikTok, some of the things that happened in this video. And 18-month-old Daisy. Now keep in mind that all of this was on camera. That's the most disturbing part of this. One of Peter's victims actually ended up dying. They were buried in his house. And this sick individual literally sold that video footage across the world. And what's even more disturbing is that there were lots of people willing to pay to see that video. I'm not kidding. People were paying $10,000 to view this video. That is absolute insanity that there are people that sick out there in the world. And this is only the beginning of the crimes that this guy carried out. Some of the other stuff that we're going to touch on is absolutely disgusting. It's just horrific. And the story of how Peter Scully was eventually identified and arrested is extremely captivating. I'm going to run out of time here on this video, but if you want to see a part 2, let me know below. This story is far from over.